morning, and very pleased to be here again and be visiting with you. Very nice to be here for the Thanksgiving weekend. I've been asked to speak from Isaiah, who may be a different prophet from the person who Mark was speaking about. So Isaiah is the majority world. On this note of the fraternity either side of the Atlantic, on this Thanksgiving lunch, I wanted to bring a contribution from England, which is an English breakfast tea. This, in a way, is kind of to heal the lack of friendship at Boston. So, just to say that there's no hard feelings on our part, even though some in Britain feel that "Make America Great Britain Again" would be an amazing kind of campaign slogan. Okay, so we're going to read from Isaiah chapter 1 through to chapter 2. I mean, it's a very searching chapter and a very searching book. There are not a lot of laughs in Isaiah. It's almost like going to the dentist or having surgery. You are better afterwards, and you're pleased you went. But there's a sense in which there's something that makes you a little uncomfortable about being there. So I'm starting this. Mark gave me this chapter, I suppose, because it is probing. So, the vision concerning Judah and Jerusalem that Isaiah son of Amoz saw during the reigns of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. Hear me, you heavens. Listen, earth, for the Lord has spoken. I reared children and brought them up, and they have rebelled against me. The ox knows its master, the donkey its owner's manger. But Israel does not know. My people do not understand. Woe to the sinful nation, a people whose guilt is great, a brood of evildoers, children given to corruption. They have forsaken the Lord. They have spurned the Holy One of Israel and turned their backs on him. Why should you be beaten any more? Why do you persist in rebellion? Your whole head is injured. Your whole heart is afflicted. From the sole of your foot to the top of your head, there is no soundness, only wounds and bruises and open sores, not cleansed or bandaged or soothed with oil. Your country is desolate. Your cities burned with fire. Your fields are being stripped by foreigners right before you, laid waste as when overthrown by strangers. Daughter Zion is left like a shelter in a vineyard, like a hut in a cucumber field, like a city under siege. Unless the Lord Almighty had left us some survivors, we would have become like Sodom. We would have become like Gomorrah. Hear the word of the Lord, you rulers of Sodom. Listen to the instruction of our God, you people of Gomorrah. The multitudes of your sacrifices, what are they to me, says the Lord? I have more than enough of burnt offerings, of rams and the fat of fattened animals. I have no pleasure in the blood of bulls and lambs and goats. When you come to appear before me, who has asked this of you, this trampling of my courts? Stop bringing meaningless offerings. Your incense is detestable to me. New moon Sabbaths and convocations, I cannot bear your worthless assemblies. Your new moon feasts and your appointed festivals I hate with all my being. They have become a burden to me. I am weary of bearing them. When you spread out your hands in prayer, I hide my eyes from you. Even when you offer many prayers, I am not listening. Your hands are full of blood. Wash and make yourselves clean. Take your evil deeds out of my sight. Stop doing wrong. Learn to do right. Seek justice. Defend the oppressed. Take up the cause of the fatherless. Plead the case of the widow. Come now, let us settle the matter, says the Lord. Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they are as red as crimson, they shall be like wool. If you are willing and obedient, you will eat the good things of the land. And if you resist and rebel, you will be devoured by the sword, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. See how the faithful city has become a prostitute. She once was full of justice, righteousness used to dwell in her, but now murderers. Your silver has become dross, your choice wine is diluted with water. Your rulers are rebels, partners with thieves. They all love bribes and chase after gifts. They do not defend the cause of the fatherless. The widow's case does not come before them. Therefore, the Lord Almighty, the Mighty One of Israel, declares, I will vent my wrath on my foes and avenge myself on my enemies. I will turn my hand against you. I will thoroughly purge away your dross and remove all your impurities. I restore your leaders as in the days of old, your rulers as in the beginning. Afterwards you will be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city. Zion will be delivered with justice, her penitent ones with righteousness. But rebels and sinners will both be broken, and those who forsake the Lord will perish. You'll be ashamed because of the sacred oaks in which you have delighted. You'll be disgraced because of the gardens that you have chosen. You'll be like an oak with fading leaves, like a garden without water. The mighty man will become tinder, and his work a spark. Both will burn together, with no one to quench the fire. This is what Isaiah, son of Amoz, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of the mountains. It will be exalted above the hills, and all the nations will stream to it. Many peoples will come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and so that we may walk in his paths. The law will go out from Zion, the words of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. Come, descendants of Jacob, let us walk in the light of the Lord." Isaiah is a prophet, and one of the words for prophet is seer. A seer is someone who sees things that other people don't see. They see from the perspective of heaven. They understand realities that most people miss. They see with a kind of X-ray vision into the human heart and the human condition. They read a society and they interpret how a society is going. And they speak with effectiveness and power and insight into that society. A prophet is a seer. And of course, the whole point of reading the Bible is that we have our eyes opened. By nature, our eyes are closed. The Bible is designed to shed light upon us so that we begin to see things clearly. The Christian faith is a new way of seeing. That's the point of being a Christian. And of course, the way we see is to have light. And Isaiah is full of these themes of light and darkness. We will come to that as we approach Christmas time and those great chapters, Isaiah 7 and 9. The whole idea of light shining in a place of darkness. Now, it's great to have the picture that reminds us that in the midst of this devastation that's described in most of Isaiah 1, there is hope. There is always hope. However dark Isaiah's prophecy becomes, there is always hope. I was saying to Tanya earlier that I read an article recently from Christianity Today, and it said that the third most mentioned living thing in the Bible is trees. And it's a great symbol, a potent symbol of surviving even after the worst of things. So a mighty tree is chopped down, there is a forest fire, and then afterwards there is fresh growth, seeds, the stump, hope again. It's a great picture how resilient God's creation of the tree is, and the idea that even out of barrenness there will be a tree of life. So, Isaiah prophesied during the reign of 4 kings. And if you know anything about these kings, you can read about them in Kings or Chronicles in the Old Testament. 3 of them were mixed in terms of their faithfulness to God. Only one of them really seems to have a positive press all the way through his life of being a king. So Isaiah had this opportunity to prophesy during this important period in the life of Judah. And it reminds us that the prophet, the seer, speaks words for the here and now. Here we've got a prophet speaking to power, a prophet speaking in the context of politics and political decisions, day-to-day life and work, the decisions that we make about the economy and about society in general. Isaiah is not somehow lobbing words at people with no kind of sense of rootedness or context. These are words for human beings in human society in the midst of human history. The Bible is space-time history. It is God speaking to space-time history. God is talking to us. God is talking to us in the reigns of Trump and May and the European Union and so on. God speaks to us now for a purpose. And there are 2 things really that we see in this chapter. The first thing we see is that there are 2 ways to live. It's a very simple thing really. That either we are near to God or far from God, and that's really the story of those 4 kings. Those 4 kings are described in the rest of the Old Testament either as doing that which was right in the eyes of the Lord, or somehow mixing that with not being so faithful, or abandoning faithfulness altogether. So Uzziah, the king, did very, very well until he decided that he wanted to sprinkle the incense in the temple, and he ended up with leprosy bursting out on his forehead and living in an excluded house for the rest of his reign. A very, very good career that was suddenly ruined by failing to see the way that he was supposed to operate, the way that he was supposed to follow God. And it's a salutary thing when you get older. It's kind of interesting, you can be really keen for God as a teenager, or your 20s or your 30s, and you can imagine that this is going to be the soundtrack of your life forever. But sometimes the midlife crisis strikes. And the midlife crisis, for some people, happens when they're 30, or 25, or maybe 45, 50, 60. And the brightness of commitment to God can suddenly fade. And there are people who were leaders in the Christian church in their youth who are nowhere spiritually now. There are 2 ways to live. We either are near to God or we are far from God. And if we're not drawing nearer to God, the likelihood is we are not standing still, but we're moving away from God. And in these kind of times, there is a need to be invited back, to come back to God. I guess probably every day is a call to come back to God, isn't it? Probably every day we need to say, well, okay, there are things about my life, my walk with God, that needs to be readjusted. And here in Isaiah, we're told to listen. Isaiah says there, verse 2, "Hear me, you heavens, listen, earth, for the Lord has spoken." Listen is one of those defining words of biblical Christianity. God speaks and we listen. And listening is a very important thing to develop. Some people only listen to the sound of their own voice. Some people, when they listen to other people, only hear the sound of their own voice. We need to learn to listen to what God has to say to us. That's so important. And God is saying to the people of Isaiah, you have abandoned me. recognise the slippage, recognise what it is to drift from me. What sad words they are. Thinking about that lovely family. How many?
Oh,
5. Wonderful. I reared children and brought them up, but they have rebelled against me. The ox knows its master, the donkey its owner's manger, but Israel does not know, my people do not understand. We have a son who's studying in Canada, and we have 2 girls as well. Girls speak to you every day. Boys speak to you when they need some money. But we know that they love us. We know that we are in their lives and they're in their hearts, and that's so important to us as parents. God is a parent saying, I've reared up children and they want nothing to do with me. It's a tragic thing, it's heartbreaking. Can you imagine that as a parent? That your children said, I never want to have anything to do with you ever again. I don't care about your values. I don't want to belong to you. There is slippage. We forget who we are. We forget what we're for. It's really important, isn't it, for human beings to understand our identity. We understand our identity as God's children, God's people, and then we understand what we're for. We're for relationship. Communicast reminds us of that, doesn't it? We're for relationship, relating to God in love and relating to human beings in love too. Love God with all your being and love your neighbour as yourself. In fact, that's almost, although it's not written, it's almost written all over Isaiah chapter 1. Recognising the slippage. And of course, with this slippage, there is incredible wreckage. We're not able to mention every verse in this passage, but that statement there, that the people are like a beaten up individual, verses 5 and 6. Now, any of you seen the iconic film On the Waterfront, when Marlon Brando finally is beaten up by the mob, and the beautiful face of Marlon Brando, that kind of Renaissance-looking man, the one who could have been a contender, is all broken. The nation is in a bloody mess. It is broken. It is bleeding as a consequence of leaving God. And he says, it's almost as if you've become like Sodom and Gomorrah. It's a horrific picture. And of course it brings us back to the idea of our identity. Our identity is that God is God. He's the creator. He is worthy, and he is worthy of our worship. And of course Isaiah reminds us of the heart of worship, of what it is to know God. Hear the words of the Lord, verse 10, you rulers of Sodom. Listen to the instruction of God, you people of Gomorrah. The multitude of your sacrifices, what are they to me? You may know the song, Heart of Worship by Matt Redman. Coming back to the heart of worship, he sings, I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I've made it, when it's all about you. It's all about you. Matt Redman was the worship leader of Soul Survivor Church in Watford. As a teenager, he was converted there, and he led worship at Soul Survivor Church and the 8,000 attendees at the Soul Survivor summer events for youth. But they realised that they'd become very proud of their band and very proud of their music. So they decided to have no music, no songs for several weeks. And then after several weeks, Matt Redman came back with just an acoustic guitar. He'd written the song, When the Music Fades, the heart of worship. As a reminder that it was God who was the heart of worship. Their fantastic band was not the focus of their worship. God was the focus of their worship. And it calls us to ask the question, is my worship to God hypocritical? Am I meaning what I'm saying? Is what I'm bringing in my worship something which is connected to my life? Or is it disconnected from personal life? those words in verse 15, that you are, well, I'm not listening to your prayers because your hands are full of blood. Perhaps that helps us to understand why Paul said to Timothy in 1 Timothy, let men pray, lifting up holy hands. Because hands do other things. Hands are unfaithful. Hands are cruel. Hands can crush as well as caress. Hands can be raised in adoration of God. The same hands can abuse a partner or a child. And God says, I'm not interested in you coming with your hands to offer sacrifices if they're full of blood. Is your worship disconnected from daily life? Was it the head of McDonald's said, God, the family, and the business, on Monday morning the order is reversed. And that's the nature of human life often, isn't it? That God can be worshipped on a Sunday, but money is worshipped on a Monday. Or power is worshipped on a Monday. Is my worship disconnected from my daily life? Learn to do right. Seek justice. Defend the oppressed. Take up the cause of the fatherless. Plead the case of the widow. It is interesting that one of the things that Communitas has been doing is remembering the fatherless. And of course James tells us in James 1 that the religion God the Father delights in is to care for the widow and the fatherless, and to keep ourselves unspotted from the world. But of course the important thing to recognise is that whatever the slippage of a human being, there is a way back to God. But we used to sing a song, there's a way back to God from the dark paths of sin. There is a door that is open, and you may come in. The Calvary's cross is where you begin when you come as a sinner to Jesus. There is a way back. The door is always open. There's a guy in Britain called Rob Parsons, and he does a lot of stuff with families and so on. And he wrote a book called Bringing Back the Prodigals. And there's a lovely story in the book about a mother whose daughter left home, and she'd been away from home many, many years. She got involved in lots of really rubbish stuff. But the mother left a light on in the porch of the house every night. And the light was a signal to her daughter that it was still home. And when the daughter came home, she said, I came past the house many times. I saw the light on. I wanted to come in. But I just daren't come in because I hadn't really sorted myself out. I just felt so ashamed. But she finally came home because she knew she could come home. There is a homecoming because there is a home. That's the point, isn't it? There is a homecoming. There is a possibility of drawing back to God when we have broken his heart, because there is a light in the porch of heaven for us. Always such a light for us. That famous painting, this time not by Tanya, by Rembrandt, hangs in St. Petersburg, the prodigal son. The reminder that there is a way home. There is a way home. When we stray from his presence, he longs for you to come back. Just to kind of say that I do read The Americans, John Stanley, Atlantic. God bless America. I mean it. And then this great statement, that probably is the statement that most people know from Isaiah. Come, let us reason together, says the Lord. Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be white as snow. Though they are as red as crimson, they shall be like wool. Of course, Your hands are full of blood. Their sins really were red like scarlet. This is a Macbeth moment, trying to wash away the blood in the hands, but no water will do it. Only God can do it. Come, let us reason. What an amazing thing. You have messed up your life. You have messed up your nation. Your nation is like a bloodied man who's been beaten up, laying in the gutter, with no prospect of a future or a turnaround. And God says, come, let's talk about this. You can be clean. What a wonderful thing that is. A friend of mine was a preacher in South Wales many decades ago. He was preaching about the power of God. A lady came into the church on a Sunday evening. She was listening from the back row. She was involved in witchcraft in Wales. She came in and she said, when you were preaching, I experienced power. I know what power is because I've been involved in power all of my life. But what I noticed was something different. The power that you had was a clean power. There are many powers, aren't there, that grip human beings. Powers of addiction, ambition that gets out of control, living for the expectations of ourselves or others, powers that grip us and strangle us. But there is a clean power, the clean power of God that can make us clean, that can wash us new. What a wonderful thing that is. It's a great thing too, isn't it, that sin is not spoken of as black. That's a very unhelpful thing, isn't it? It's spoken of as red, like blood. Red like blood. And of course the amazing thing is that God can make this offer because he has shed his blood for us. That's how the offer can be made. Although Isaiah makes it 700 years before, Isaiah is called the fifth gospel because he speaks so often of Jesus. It's quite plain that the promises that Isaiah makes are only ever going to be delivered when Jesus comes and gives himself for us. You can be clean. Starting all over. Beginning all over again. Change is possible. That's what Isaiah is saying to us. So there are two ways to live, and then very briefly, there are two cities, and this is particularly pertinent as we think about Communitas, a church that has in its name that you are a community, that you are a city on a hill, another American reference, that you are a city of light and welcome to those that are around you. We choose to identify with one or two cities, the city of God or the city of human beings. Isaiah says, Isaiah 1:26, you shall be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city. How did that happen? The city which is ruined, which is scorched earth, which is broken, suddenly restored. What is rubbish, harmed, distant from God, can be restored. Everything can be better. I was hearing the other day, someone been to a church, elderly woman, big building in Wales, tiny congregation, but she was the custodian of the church, and you could go around and have a look. The guy was thinking about this woman and said, well, excuse me, I know it's not polite to ask for the age of a lady, but how old are you? And she told him, and he worked out that she'd been alive in 1904 when there was a great revival in Wales. He said, was it true? Was it true that people in those days, miners, were converted, and when they were converted, the pit ponies didn't recognise the miners because they were not swearing? Is that true? I said, well, yeah, it is true, because my dad was one of those miners who was converted at that time. And his whole life cleaned up. His whole act cleaned up. I can say that that's true, and the church was full as a result of people coming to know Christ. They said that in the mines they had to build new tool houses to store the tools that were returned by the miners because they'd stolen them in the past. Had to build new sheds in order to contain them. Yes, a community can change. That's so important, isn't it? I think it's interesting that God has placed the Latvian Biblical Centre here, and for the time that you can fit into this place, Communitas here, because there are some things going on in this community, the possibility of regeneration. Thank you for being involved in that special day in June, which sought to be a blessing to the local community. Some people came into here and came to the events around about here, enjoyed the food from different nations, and it was obvious that they hadn't had that kind of affection shown to them by people in this community in the past. We know that around here the blood of Jewish people during the Second World War was shed. We know that there is some oppressed people and people on difficult rents with difficult landlords around here. Maybe LBC and you are here in order to make a difference in this community. You should be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city. But of course, if you don't buy into the city of God, what a devastating thing this. You will be like an oak with fading leaves, like a garden without water. Remember who you are. Remember where you belong. You thrive when you identify with God, when you belong amongst his people. You wilt and die. You are nothing without him. Without him, we are nothing. That's what Jesus says in John chapter 15. So, God says, come up to the city. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of the mountains. It will be exalted above the hills, and all nations will stream to it. In the New Testament, the last days seem to be referring to that time between the first coming and the second coming of Jesus, the time of the revelation of God's gospel. Come up. Suddenly God does something to bring Jew and Gentile together into a community of faith. The people of faith, following the promise that was given to Abraham, experiencing the blessing of God as a joint people, a fresh new city, the city of Jerusalem now not just a physical place, but a spiritual reality, a place that embraces people of all times and all places. Come up. All nations will stream to it. Well, we've got a little bit of a visual aid of that today. I'm not sure how many nations we've got here. But God is working around the world. He's bringing nations to himself. It's a true centre in a disorientated world. Isn't that what Community House seeks to be? A centre where people don't know where they belong. They don't know where they're going. They don't know what's true. They've got a place where they can be orientated. That's what the church does. That's what the city of God does. True revelation in a confused world. Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord. The temple of the God of Jacob will teach us his ways, that we may walk in his paths. The Lord will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. People are confused, aren't they, today? They need truth. Truth is what makes clarity. And from the city, truth will emerge so that people can be clear about who they are, how they can know God, and how they can live for him. And true peace in a divided world. What a moving thing it is in church when people that don't come from similar backgrounds, socially, economically, tribally, love each other, work with each other. It's a beautiful thing. The church is a beautiful thing. The city of God is a beautiful thing, a place of peace in a divided world. What an amazing thing it is when people from different sides of the divide in Northern Ireland say, I love you, brother, sister. People in different parts of the US, black, white, north, south. I love you. You are a brother. Russian speaking, Latvian speaking. I love you, brother. It was great here in this place yesterday. Have a group of Russian speaking pastors, some of whom were unregistered Baptist pastors in the day. Some quite suspicious, not only suspicious of Latvians, but suspicious of other Russian speakers. We're here with some guys from Finland and the Latvian Baptist bishop. Here, in this room. That's a turn up, isn't it? That's what the city does. It brings people together. It builds bridges rather than walls. And it's a place of light in a dark world. Come, let us walk in the light of the Lord. Light attracts us. It draws us in. And when the light of Christ shines into the lives of this variegated group of people that is the Church of Jesus Christ, what a beautiful display it is. Light shining through many, many colours and facets and shapes. This is what God has done. When we do something, we make the United Nations. Well, they say, when God freezes water, we make snowflakes. When we freeze water, we make ice cubes, all the same size and all the same shape. God is building a city. A city with foundations, whose builder and maker is God, as the writer of the Hebrew puts it. I am part of that city. That's where I belong. That's where I identify. I am a Christian who happens to be from Britain. I'm not a Brit who happens to be a Christian. What is your primary identity? Is it that you are a follower of Jesus Christ, washed clean by him, and part of the city of God, his church? Or do you hang on to any other kind of identity? There's no future in any identity other than knowing God through faith in Jesus Christ. Are you part of the city